Now, going back to historian, researcher, author Harley Schlanger joining us via video connection from Houston. Harley, I was asking you to get into the social Darwinistic Malthusians that run things and where their program is going to lead us and what you are forecasting is going to happen, not just in the U.S., but worldwide in the next year to 2 years if things are not reversed.
Well, Lyndon LaRouche has a 5-decade record of forecasting, and many, many years ago, with the launching of the environmentalist movement on college campuses during the Vietnam War, it became clear that there was an attempt to limit and destroy populations. Let me just cite 2 examples of this that are official government policy. One was the National Security Study Memo 200, which was adopted by Henry Kissinger, which said that population threat in the developing sector is the greatest threat to U.S. security, and the U.S. should use any means at its disposal, including food as a weapon, to reduce populations in developing sector. Then under Carter, we had Global 2000, which essentially said U.S. overproduction, U.S. technology, U.S. science is a problem because it engenders cultural optimism, and cultural optimism will lead to more people. It will lead to new scientific discoveries and will use up the resources of the planet, and therefore we have to stop development. Now that's what's behind the deindustrialization policy. We see on economics, they've created a global economic policy of a rule by cartels. The empire is really a series of interlocking cartels in finance, insurance, pharmaceuticals, oil, raw materials, and so on, who are there to prey upon populations, to wipe out whole sectors of the human race. Some of these people are on record, like you mentioned Maurice Strong, or I've heard you mention him before. They're on record of saying the world is overpopulated when there's more than 1 billion people. So what do you do with 6 billion? Well, we're about to see with the hyperinflation and with the weather problems around the world, we're going to see food shortages that will take millions, hundreds of millions of lives. In populations that are weakened for lack of food and medication, basically bodies become petri dishes for the spawning of new diseases. And this is why LaRouche is saying we face a dark age, which if we don't get rid of Obama, and if we don't get back to our constitutional economic principles, we will be in a dark age. And I'm not talking 50, 100 years from now. I'm talking months from now, because we could have an implosion of the entire global financial system even before September.
Well, that's what
Ted Turner...
I mean, to interrupt just to back you up, that's what Ted Turner, that's what the UN...
No, that's fine.
That's what all of them say, that it's good to be post-industrial. They're selling this as a good thing. You go to Whole Foods, and many of the magazines for the trendies are how great austerity is, how great it is for things to fall apart, right, how wonderful... all of this is. I mean, this is such a sickening plan to boil it down, and then I want you to continue with the collapse they're designing. These are Ponzi scheme operators that have created over 1,000 trillion in fake derivatives. They have bought the world up through fraud. They're artificially depressing the economy to bankrupt people so that folks will not be upwardly mobile. I mean, this is a corporate genocide. If you go back to ancient cultures, they would go in and wipe out the nearby tribe. The corporatists have said, we've stolen the world through fraud and through insider crony capitalism, the opposite of free market. We are now going to sell a religion of self-loathing and hating to turn people's own survival instinct against itself. I mean, this is so diabolical, and it's the British Malthusian eugenics system adopted by the U.S., adopted by Hitler, being implemented by stealth. Yeah. It is so monstrous. So please continue.
Well, what you said is absolutely right. This is the Hitler policy, only now it's global. And this is a 1930s-style depression, except global, and they've already used up all their bullets. They have created so much funny money in the last 3 years. And of course, it hasn't worked to create jobs. It hasn't worked to deal with the housing crisis. The new home sales are continuing to fall. More and more people are not just out of work, but we're losing skills. We're losing whole sections of the human race. But the people who believe this hate human beings. They think they're entitled, as an imperial class is entitled to the wealth, the sweat of the brow of the entire human race. And if there are too many humans, they've got to get rid of them. Cull the herd is the term they use. So this Malthusian policy is exactly what was brought in with the breakdown of the Bretton Woods system in 1971. And it's exactly what Lyndon LaRouche was saying in December of 1970, early 71. Now, it took a step forward with Bush following 9/11, which LaRouche had forecast was coming as a Reichstag fire excuse. It continued with the housing bubble. It's now at a point where they can't sustain it. But we're also seeing an explosion of wars, of starvation, of refugee camps where people are being herded to die. And we're also seeing in the United States, Alex, and this is important, this is why Obama is such a criminal who has to go. It's not that he's responsible for this. He's the president, and he's carrying it out. But his policy is going to turn America's cities into war zones. They're going to be, there's already 40%, 50% African-American unemployment in major urban centers. This is just going to get worse. If it weren't for the drug economy and the black economy that underlies it, the underground economy, you would already have riots and chaos. So what we've seen happen in the Arab Spring, which actually started, I'm not talking about the funny business in Libya, but in Tunisia and Egypt, it started because people with college degrees couldn't get jobs. They couldn't afford to eat. It spread into Europe. In Europe, they're creating a hyperinflationary bubble to defend the euro, which was originally set up precisely for this banker's dictatorship. And in this country, we're sitting here as Americans angry. We're losing hope. But the only hope that remains is that the American people will take the constitutional remedy, which is called a credit policy, which is the American constitutional system, which means we have to get rid of the Federal Reserve. We have to write down this bad debt, write it off, let it sit there. Instead of having the people be saddled with the debt, give it back to the bankers. That's why LaRouche is saying Glass-Steagall is not just legislation. It's a principle of economy. And just one other point on this. Look, this debt ceiling debate was a complete fraud. The way you deal with a debt problem is you start producing. You put people to work. You differentiate between credit, which is for innovative technological development for the future, versus payment on worthless pieces of paper accumulated through a casino gambling process. And so we have a very clear picture ahead of us. And I think the only question is, will the American people find the guts to throw Obama out, to cause their congressmen to storm town meetings, to express their discontent and their anger, and not just their anger, but become thoughtful and actually express their love of humanity by saying we're not going to put up with this anymore?
Well, Harley, that obviously is an imperative. The problem is, get rid of Obama, they're just going to end up putting in a Rick Perry who's bought and paid for by the same interest, or somebody like a Mitt Romney. And if you look at these people, they know people are starting to wake up to the private Federal Reserve being the author of our misery. That's why Rick Perry's now saying, hey, the Federal Reserve's treacherous, why almost treasonous. We see Congress's approval rating at 9%. We see 11% of the country thinking the government's doing the people's will. So certainly the public is awake that we're being basically robbed and cheated, but they're not fully awake to the details. So why would, I mean, obviously I'm for impeaching Obama right now for the unconstitutional power grabs. But what about Boehner? What about Reid? What about this political class that has put Homeland Security in place, not to fight Muslim extremists, but from day one to suppress the American people if we ever tried to get control of our government again?
Well, Alex, let me give you an example of something that happened within our lifetime, 21 years ago in Europe, where the dictatorships of Eastern Europe were overthrown by a popular uprising. Out of Leipzig, in Germany, out of the Czech Republic, out of Solidarity in Poland. Yeah, the problem at that time was that we had George Herbert Walker Bush in the White House, and Thatcher and Mitterrand roped Bush into a scheme to suppress the potential of a German reunification with the Euro policy in the European Union. Now, today, we're actually seeing the whole Western world, the transatlantic system, in a breakdown even worse than what happened in the Soviet sector. The American people have been bought off with bread and circuses, with topless bars and sports and things of that sort for a long time. But we're beginning to see an awakening. Now, one of the things that LaRouche is doing, and I know he's discussed this with you on the program, is he's working on bringing into the leadership of this country a new generation, people who don't have a stake in the system. You know, the biggest problem we have is that even many of your listeners who agree with you completely, they still have a stake in the system. It's like they're lying in a rotting corpse and they're saying, well, I still have something going on here. Or someone on the sinking Titanic who's afraid to get on the lifeboat.
Well, that's how they hold you hostage, just to interject. That's how they hold you hostage. They devalue your pensions with currency devaluation. They start cutting the pensions, but you still take it because, oh, you're still getting 25%. It's like, well, I better stay in the game, even though they're stealing most of it from me, even though down the road they'll steal that final little piece.
Absolutely, and hyperinflation will wipe it all out. But what we're looking at now is there are a lot of young people who don't have that same delusion. They don't believe in the system. They don't believe in the baby boomer generation. They know the boomers have this system as their only option. And so what LaRouche has done is put together a slate of 6 candidates, and I've been privileged to work with the candidates to put forward an alternative, going back to the American system, not accepting the corruption and the fraud and the lying and the killing, and actually putting forward a series of proposals which are available. People can go to LaRouchePAC.com and see the videos done by the young people. And I'd also like to give a toll-free number if people want to call and find out what they can do to join us with people who are out to get rid of Obama. For example, State Senator Perry Clark of Kentucky put out a very strong statement. He's a Democrat, calling for the removal of Obama. Keisha Rogers, who I work with in Houston, won the Democratic primary in 2010 in the 22nd District by calling for impeaching Obama to save NASA. So we've got a movement going. People can get in touch with us by calling 800-929-7566. This is a call to action. We don't have much time, so you can give us a call. Tell us you heard it on the Alex Jones Show, 800-929-7566. We have 6 candidates. We want to recruit more. We want to have candidates all over the country who are going to fight for Glass-Steagall and fight for the Constitution and not accept the lies that somehow you can cut your way, you can kill off the elderly to get back into production or back into balance, or you can shut down industry and have a recovery. Obama's jobs program is more free trade. Haven't we learned anything from this?
Yeah, new deals with South Korea and Central and South America to ship more of our jobs out. I mean, it is so dastardly. Or to have the stimulus bill for the bailout of the auto companies and then give them billions to move overseas. It is so incredible. When we come back, I want to get into your writings on the ADL, because the Anti-Defamation League doesn't go after real criminals. What they do is slander people that are exposing the banking cartel, and I know you've researched it in depth, so I want to get your take on that as well. Then when we start the 3rd hour, listeners, we're going to have wide open phones on any of the news items, any of the issues we've gotten to. I've got some other important news we're going to be breaking down as well, and the latest on what's happening over in Libya. The toll-free number to join us is 800-259-9231, 800-259-9231. One more segment with our guest, and then we're going to go to your phone calls throughout the last hour. Harley Schlanger is our guest. I'm Alex Jones, and this is the one, the only GCN Radio Network, GCNlive.com.